Welcome back, everyone, to another Hearts of Iron 4 mod update spotlight about the Cold War, the Iron Curtain, and this time it's going to be the update about Africa that has just been released. So I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible, and down in the comments you're going to tell me if tomorrow, when I stream, because tomorrow I'm going to be streaming in the evening, if you want me to play this or Kaiserreich, because as people who know my channel may, have noticed, I've been playing a Kaiserreich campaign on my stream. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's get right into it. So essentially, this is a big ass update that they've had, and most of let me see if I can find the actual complete change log for it. Most of the changes have to deal with Africa and African focus trees, which is obviously pretty damn good. And essentially, no, it doesn't seem okay. Change logs. There we go, there we go. So this is a big change log. The update is called What a Time It Was, which is obviously, you know, Rhodesia, all of that. It's that song. They've added it as a, as like the first song that plays the introduction menu music. Because, of course, it's in Africa. So there's a million different focus trees. There's a lot of reworks, actually, including the, well, what it's right now called the Soviet Occupation Zone, aka the German Democratic Republic. They've completely reworked the focus tree. You cannot become a Nazi anymore, which I guess is pretty good. Everything looks pretty damn amazing. As you can see, they have kind of overhauled the way the graphics look, and that's very, very appreciated, because one of this mod's strengths really is when it's immersive, because sometimes it isn't, but sometimes it is. In fact, most of the time it is, and that makes it a lot better, in my opinion, to look at. So yeah, there's a very, very big focus tree that's sort of telling the story of what's going on in the German Democratic Republic in this period, which, you know, some of it is great, some of it is not. A lot of it is not. In terms of political choices, there's essentially, like, you're going down this main line, right? And so at the beginning, you're kind of a Soviet puppet. Then down here, you get the big choice in 1953 when the uprising is coming in. Essentially, down here, what you're gonna have is you have one route that's sort of reformist regime, kind of like you're still doing what you've been doing with the SED, which is the Sozialistische Einheitspartei Deutschland, the United Socialist Party of Germany, and there's some, you know, this is the stability path. Then you can annex the Federal Republic of Germany if you've taken this route, the Purge Ulbricht, or Ulbricht consolidates power, or the Harich group. Ulbricht consolidates power is just like Maximum Stalin, and yeah, he's like kind of a repressive guy. Then you have the Harich group, which is the even more reformist path, and that's where you can do peaceful unification with the Federal Republic. So yeah, that's for Germany. That is only the first one, though, as there are a few more new focus trees. Some of them have been removed, such as the terrible Turkish one and the very, very terrible Saudi Arabian one, which didn't really fit with what Iron Curtain had become, and they've been replaced by a generic focus tree, but like all the generic focus trees have been changed around, and now they're a new tree, which I think is pretty good, because it's just a lot more, in a way, intuitive, but also makes use of new mechanics that earlier on they weren't really part of the whole deal, obviously, because, you know, it used to be just a generic focus tree kind of ported over from a long time ago. So now you have things like special forces capacity being used, different types of research, bonuses. Then you have different national spirits, you have, you know, all the new graphics. Apparently there's stuff about your ministers, which is, I guess, pretty fine. And then there's also, where is it down here, there's Soviet alignment, self-alignment, and Western alignment. Self-alignment is just like a little bit more ways in which you can conduct an independent policy. So, you know, obviously less resources to the market and less justify war goal time. Then you have the Western alignment, which is all about building up some of your economy. Then you have the Soviet alignment, which is some economy, but a little bit more in terms of stability. Actually, no, they're basically the same. So I guess the only difference is who's going to get opinion with you. You get a top secret research facility. So yeah, that's basically a pretty standard kind of tree, but it works. They've reworked Iran and Iraq and Egypt, all of which are pretty appreciated, to be honest. The Egyptian tree is absolutely great. It's really, really good. So there's the bit of military stuff where you get a ship. I'm not sure what ship it is. I've played as Egypt, but I haven't taken this focus, so I have no idea what that does. Then the Egyptian army gets you some equipment for free and some marshals and manpower, even though Egypt actually starts with a massive amount of manpower. If we can switch it up to Egypt, we can see that they start off with 1 million for some reason. Going down, then you have the Air Force, which gets you a very nice bunch of equipment. Never bad. But the meat and potatoes is the, obviously, foreign affairs and political line, where you have the Mad King, Farouk I, who's kind of a playboy. He's the ruler of the Muhammad Ali dynasty. Yeah, the pugilist guy, the boxer, he named himself after a famous Egyptian leader, Muhammad Ali, who tried to essentially secure Egyptian independence from the Ottoman Empire and Egyptian sovereignty over this region. Eventually got destroyed by the Europeans. So, you know, Muhammad Ali is kind of this, I guess you could say, indigenous resistance symbol sometimes. So yeah, you start off as monarchist. You can stay monarchist if you take arrest the free officers, because Farouk I is kind of a derp. He likes to party a lot. If you've played Kaiserreich, you know what's up, because Farouk does this, does his antics in Kaiserreich as well. So yeah, and you can either arrest the free officers, which is the movement within the army that is trying to oust the monarchy and essentially say up with Arab nationalism and down with Israel, down with the West, down with the monarchy, all this kind of stuff. And you can do some pretty you can turn Egypt into the party state, not as in this party state or this party state or this party state, but as in let's have fun. Kappa. Or you can obviously do the Egyptian Revolution, which is the historical path, and from here, that's essentially about reclaiming the Arab world for Egypt, or I guess becoming the hegemon of the Arab world. There's a few ways in which you can do it. There's the socialists down here, aligning with the Warsaw Pact totally under Khalid Muhyiddin. I have no idea who he is. That's a pretty common theme. There's a lot of different political figures that I have no idea about that are present. Then there's obviously Gamal Abdel Nasser, who is the historical leader of Egypt, who ends up forming the United Arab Republic, which unfortunately for it doesn't last that long. Anyway, that's the historical path. And then you have Naguib, who can branch off into either democracy, in terms of social democracy. So this part is actually the it's the Muslim Brotherhood, because the other one you can have is the Ikhwan Brotherhood. Not the same as the Saudi Arabian Ikhwan, which is another brotherhood. They're still Muslim, but you know, this is the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, and there's two paths for the Muslim Brotherhood. There's Sayyid Qutb, who is actually it's pretty famous because he's one of the first actual jihadist theorists, like theorists of Islam, like political Islam and political violence and terrorism in a way. Even though he's not like an Al-Qaeda kind of figure, because, you know, obviously that's what we have in mind in the 21st century. But yeah, he's one of the first theorists really of Islam and Islamic ideology as a kind of anti-Israel, anti-West, pro-Arab ideology. Because, you know, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, generally monopoly within the Arab nationalist camp was, again, secular nationalism and sometimes left-wing interpretations of the same nationalism. But yeah, Sayyid Qutb, very interesting figure, should read up on it, on the guy. Anyway, you can kill Israel. That's what he does. Or you can have Hassan al-Hudaybi. I have no idea who he is, but he seems to be more of what the Brotherhood eventually became. So essentially a sort of liberal, but vaguely Islamic in ideology kind of group, which is essentially what came to power very briefly in Egypt in 2013, following the Arab Spring under Mohammed Morsi. Anyway, so yeah, there's the Muslim Brotherhood. They are Islamist. But yeah, if you take Hassan al-Hudaybi, you're supposed to be kind of more of a using religion as social doctrine kind of thing, instead of kill everyone who isn't a Muslim, and especially if they're Jewish. So yeah, that's Egypt. Iraq is also very interesting in this because there's a lot of new flavor for Iraq. Then there's obviously, you know, some stuff for you know, the Royal Iraqi Army, Royal Iraqi Navy, and the Royal Iraqi Air Force. All pretty standard. You can recognize Israel because why the hell not? And then you have a bunch of turmoil happening. So you have the Rising, the Intifada. From there, you can either be reactionary, or eventually have the Iraqi Revolution happen to you, which can end up turning into either... Let's actually tag over to Iraq. Wait, what? There we are. It can end up... There is the Islamic State of Iraq. Abu Omar al-Baghdadi. That's definitely not someone that's inspired by recent events. You can either have the quote-unquote socialism, aka social democracy, with a bit of extra red, or the Communist Party. And so you can either declare the People's Republic or the Republic. The Republic ends up joining the non-aligned movement, so it's like pro-Yugoslavia, pro-China, while the commies, the communists, obviously join the Warsaw Pact, and all of them can establish, establish a state economy and all of that, resolve the Kurdish conflict, because you obviously have some spirits, one of them being the Iraq Petroleum Company, mobilizing the Arab League, Kurdish conflict. So, you know, every one of these countries actually has national spirits. I haven't been looking at them, but yeah. Eventually, you get to have some elections. In those elections, you can have some nasty stuff happen, such as crazy, like, nationalist people trying to take over and say, establish the United Arab Republic on this side of the pond, essentially going Nasserist, basically. And then you can tolerate the Ba'athist movement. Now, the Ba'athist movement are the fascists, but this brings us to another change in this patch. They've changed fascists to third positionists, because why the fuck not? And yeah, here you have the Ba'ath party, which you can take into power after the 1950s are over, when the focus tree over here changes, because that's how this mod works. Essentially, once you go into the 1960s, there's a decision that pops up, and you can change around your focus tree so that you know, there's content for the 1960s as well, and in there you can have Saddam take over as the Ba'ath party. Anyway, you can also get annexed by Egypt, because why the hell not, I guess. And another thing that you can do is increase ties with Britain and form the Baghdad Pact, which eventually is supposed to come down into this one. So the formation of the UAR. So this is different from establish the UAR. It's the same thing, but it's different, because here you're passive. Egypt has formed the UAR, and so what ends up happening in in opposition to that, as a counter to that, which is what historically happens, is that Iraq, once Egypt forms the United Arab Republic, they form the Arab Federation with Jordan. And by the way, in case you do not know, the United Arab Republic was between Egypt and Syria. Syria, by the way, at the start, for some reason, starts with the Syrian National Socialist Party, also known as SSMP. I have no idea why they start off as that. Anyway, so you can do that, and then you can either preserve the Federation as a UK-friendly state, or you can also have a free officer revolution, which, again, puts the socialists in power, and, yeah, then you can join the Warsaw Pact or do whatever. Then you have the Iran rework. So Iran at the start starts as the Shahist sort of imperial state under Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Although this picture is definitely him being a little bit older than what he looked in 1950, but whatever. So you start down the line, you repress the Tudeh party. The Tudeh party are like the Iranian communists. Let's tag over to Iran so that we can see it better. So here's Tudeh. They are the Communist Party. So you want to, at the start, repress them because the Soviets were doing some derpy stuff at this, time period in like the Southern Caucasus, and so it's just a mess. Then you can have some elections, and at that moment, you have your standard elections, nothing really too strange, but in the 1952 one, you can do the National Front victory, and then the party that gets in power is the Nationalists under Mohammad Mossadegh. And if you know anything about, the CIA's history, you know that it doesn't go all that well for Mossadegh. So the Americans coup you, and from then on, very interesting things start to happen. So you can either have the Shah refuse to back down the Americans, in which case the Americans are going to find other allies and restore a different dynasty to the throne, along with a essentially religious plus like fundamentalist monarchy kind of thing, and that ends up becoming a Shia Islamist for some reason. But yeah, pan-Iranianism, because why the hell not? So yeah, this is essentially American-friendly Shia empire, kind of, and it's the Qajari restoration, and the Qajars are like the earlier dynasty before the Pahlavis in Iran. So yeah, that's what that is. Salvation of Iraq, purify the Persian language, because of course. That's pretty great. And then you have also Sharia law, Azerbaijan. So this is just, this is just nasty stuff. Salvage the situation is another thing altogether. The historical, quote-unquote, path is Shah consents to the coup, which is what happens historically. The Americans, you know, put the Shah back in total control, and, you know, we all know how that ends up in the end. You have just absolute chaos for a few years, massive dictatorship for a while, and then in the end you had the Islamist revolution. But that does not need to happen. There can be, you know, protests are crushed. Where is it? Which is here in staged riots. So from this place, there's going to be events, and you can either go down here and say crush the protests, and that declares the survival of Iranian democracy. So that's not bad for you, even though you have to do some purges in the meantime. Another thing you can do is you have Tudeh hijacking. So what the Americans wanted to do was, you know, obviously guard against Soviet influence, but it turns out that maybe it doesn't go all that well for them. So you can go down the communist line and then either join the non-alliance or the Warsaw Pact. If you have taken democracy, then you can do some more elections. And one of them actually comes down and gives you Islamism, because, of course. Then there's either other options where obviously you can do other stuff, but it's mostly just social democracy. So yeah, you can make Iran a bastion of democracy. Or another one is the, where is it? This is so big, as you can see. Salvage the situation, which is, quote-unquote, the more historical one. And that's essentially the, quote-unquote, monarchist path. You established the Sabak, which was the kind of secret police that the regime had set up. You have a lot of social progressivism because, yeah, essentially to repress some of the more anti-regime forces, which a lot of the times used religious ideologies, the Shah, and also to promote modernization. The Shah definitely was very much in favor of secularizing the state, and that eventually means that you're also having the cult of the ancient Persian Empire. Then you have a coup attempt down here, where you can either free Mossadegh and go to the 1958 elections, so back onto here, as you can see, where you can establish the Islamic Republic of Iran, or go back to Mossadegh and be a crazy social democrat. Or you can come down here and execute Mossadegh and either have the Shah be assassinated, and then you can join a Warsaw Pact again. So as you can see, there's just so many different paths that can kind of revolve in and around themselves, or concede to American demands, which is, in a way, kind of the historical one. So this is what happens IRL. Maybe there's also a 1960s treaty where you can have the Islamic Republic a little bit later, but I have no idea, actually. Then other reworks, we have South Korea. And in South Korea, it's all about this man, Syngman Rhee. He starts off as the sort of total dictator of South Korea. He's a Protestant, I believe, or maybe a Catholic. There's definitely Catholics in Korea, but I'm not sure about Syngman Rhee being a Catholic or a Protestant. He's definitely a Christian. Then there's a bit of stuff about the Korean War. Do some Incheon landings as MacArthur, getting help from the United States. After the Korean War, however that goes, you're going to have some elections. So there's a kind of moderate central path over here, where it's all about rapprochement with the North. Then there's the Neo-Confucianism, which is hilarious. Let's tag over to Korea. And keep in mind that other than Syngman Rhee and Park, who is in the 1960 line for Korea, I have no idea who any of these people are. So one of them is Chung Bong-am, and I'll be mispronouncing everything. He is social democratic, I believe. Social democracy. Yeah, he looks to be pretty social democratic, aka, if we take a look, oh, it's just called social democracy. I don't know then. What's his name? Chongbong Is that the name? I have no idea. Huh, there's the New Democratic Party. He doesn't seem to exist, so that's kind of annoying. Yeah, look at that. Where is it? Yeah, third positionist, Park Chung-hye. That's a person that becomes important. You have the legacy of the Japanese occupation, obviously. So yeah, there's this central path. Then there's the glorious Neo-Confucianism under Isi Yong, and he restored the Yi dynasty. So that's the Kingdom of Korea, and essentially Korean nationalism, traditionalism, and you know, just in general, the greatest thing ever. Although I'm not sure if you are gonna get monarchist ideology or nationalist ideology from there. I don't. I don't know. Doesn't really seem like you have any ideology increasing stuff here. So yeah, it's just nationalism plus 10%, but it might not be. It might not be that. And then you can continue as Syngman Rhee, obviously. You start off as a conservative as him, but he's essentially like a autocrat. And continuing as Syngman Rhee is the historical path. Then in the 1956 elections, you can have some peaceful reunification if you choose Chong Bong-nam, aka this guy in the center. And yeah, everyone likes some peaceful reunifications. Restore relations with the Soviets, all that stuff. And there's Chang Myon, who's more pro-Japanese and very Catholic, so he's obviously anti-military. He's more of the economic kind of guy, and pro-democracy, so you restore democracy essentially from the Rhee regime. Or you can have Syngman Rhee president for life, you know, because why the hell not? Which is the historical path again. And yeah, I love how his party is the liberal democracy. I just love how in Asia, every time anyone's called like a liberal democratic party, it just doesn't mean anything. Anyway, there's also, speaking of liberal democratic parties, there's Japan. Japan has been reworked quite a bit, and it's just so sexy. Look at this shit. Look at this shit. Like, it's just so good, you know? There's the Japanese motor industry. How great. In terms of the politics, it's a little bit simpler, even. One of them is great, though. You can have the ultra-nationalist plot after the Korean War. So one option is the historical path. It's the Treaty of San Francisco. Afterwards, you get the Minjuto, aka the Liberal Democratic Party, I believe. Because Minshujiyuto is definitely Liberal Democratic Party. And yeah, okay, so it's definitely this one. So yeah, you're gonna either go down the historical path and have elections and become a democracy, or declare the return of the empire, and you will be presumably known as the Japanese Empire instead of Japan, because there's a bug. You repeal Article 9 because, of course, and a nationalist government under Takushiro Hattori will now rule Japan. This is great because actually America supports you. Because, you know, you're supposed to be kind of a bastion of anti-Soviet influence, anti-Chinese influence in Asia, and so yeah, in the end it says restore democratic rule, but it doesn't actually do anything, so whatever. In terms of Japan's elections, they happen very quickly, and you can either pick one of the many parties that are going around. So there's like the liberals over here, the Kashinto, just, you know, very much like pretty standard kind of people. I believe they're Like, what's their ideology, actually? I have no idea. Anyway, they do some rearmament because they're nice people. Liberal Democratic Party, aka the, again, historical stuff. Rightist Socialist Party, aka the Social Democrats. Again, all these are pro-US generally. Then there's the Left Socialist Party, which is the quote-unquote socialism, the Shakaito. And yeah, that's just, you know, social democratic Japan. Or you can have the Japanese Communist Party, and you can be a Japanese republic, because that's always great, dissolve the Zaibatsu. And then you can request Okinawa at the 1953 elections if you have chosen the JCP. So that's always pretty good. Then yeah, then you have all the other ones that are essentially continuing on their merry path. Just in general, Japan's relatively peaceful, except for, you know, sometimes you can demand things from America and stuff. Reunification of the Socialist Party, the welfare state. Look at how strong that focus is. Holy shit. And then in the end of 1958, if you have taken the Japanese communists, you can say free, neutral, and pacifist, because the Japanese Communist Party has been historically very much anti-militarist due to Japan's political situation. So that's always been a major issue for them, is essentially isolationism, which in the framework, obviously, of international politics, Japanese isolationism generally means pro-Russianism, because, you know, in the Far East, Japan usually stands as a bulwark against Russia or against China. Anyway, that nonsense aside, yeah, you can still do Victory of the Socialist Party, and, you know, you have contacts in the Yakuza, because, great. Or you can continue with the Liberal Democratic Victory, and eventually, as Japan historically did, reopen relations with the PRC. Although you can change history and have Ishibashi, who was a Japanese prime minister that becomes very prominent, like in the late 50s, early 60s, if I'm recalling my people correctly. You can have him stay in office, which, you know, in the end, in real life, he did resign. And that ends up, you know, having your expansion be more towards Southeast Asia rather than anything else. So that's Japan. So Japan's new too. I believe there's also a bit of new in Indonesia. Oh no, okay, it's the same as it used to be. Never mind then. I am wrong. I am definitely wrong. Unfortunately, China's still the same, but China will get reworked in the next update. So very much looking forward to that. Yeah, so that's that, and wait, what? That's hilarious. So that's everywhere outside of Africa. I believe they got changed, although actually, United States got some changes too. I'm pretty sure. Support Israel, of course. Pretty sure the United States got some changes. But, like, the United States is so massive always in terms of the focus tree that it's always pretty difficult to see if anything's new. Man, look at how much stuff they can do. Crazy Americans. Yeah, so that's that for the United States. Then in Africa, which is like the focus of the update, we've already talked about Egypt. Morocco got a focus tree, which looks pretty great because I have no idea who any of these people are, but you have a bit of like a few options. You can either essentially support the French colonial regime, and then that essentially makes you annexed into France. Like, yeah, pretty much. So that's what France hopes happens. if you're playing as them. Then you can have another kind of like middle path, which can end up in either a sort of independence by peaceful means, which is down here, and you can, you know, stay as the monarchy, which is what happens IRL. And then you can either have the Greater Morocco or the Constitutional Monarchy. And it makes you join the Arab League, because the Arab League is pretty great. Or if France rejects independence, or if you have taken the assassination of Guillaume, who I'm assuming is the French governor or something. Yeah, nomination of General Guillaume. That means that you're gonna be trying to essentially declare independence and openly revolt against France, or try to essentially make it so the French are giving you independence, but generally it doesn't work. So this is the route where you're going to be fighting. Spanish intervention. French Morocco declares war on the Spanish state. Ain't that just fucking amazing? Yeah, you get volunteers from everything, and that ends up making you the Sharifian Empire. I have no idea what that's supposed to be, but yeah, sure. Hopefully there's also like ways to actually make peace with the Frenchies, but yeah, that's basically French Morocco. You can liberate Spanish Morocco, or you can you can liberate Spanish Morocco also with the center path when you're staying as the monarchy. So yeah, that's that. Then what other new focus areas? Well, there's the Gold Coast, aka Ghana, which was the first African state to achieve independence in decolonization. Unfortunately, the localization is missing, so yeah, that really deteriorates quite a bit the quality of the focus tree, unfortunately. But there's a lot of elections where you have essentially either what I believe is the historical path with Nkrumah, and he's kind of the more standard, like, kind of state capitalism kind of guy, Pan-Africanism, land reform, getting Soviet support, all that kind of stuff. Then there's the center guy is Simon Diedon. He's kind of a religious person, apparently, and more of a traditionalist. So yeah, that's that. And then there's the right side, Kofi Busia, who's the more liberal kind of person, and that's obviously going to be more towards the kind of guy that wants to align with the West. So that's that. And then there's French Equatorial Africa, which can become like some kind of Central African Federation, from what I've seen. The state of Equatorial Africa. The Equatorial African State. Sure is an inspiring name. Yeah, request independence, the governor's government, stage riots. Yeah, you know, this regular stuff. This regular stuff. Request autonomy. Ho ho ho. Oops. You can have autonomy denied. Yeah, then you also have this branch where you can become the French African Central African Union, which ends up dissolving it and getting a bunch of independent states to spit out from the wreckage, like Cameroon, Gabon. Although I believe this, like French Equatorial Africa, yeah, it's Congo essentially. So yeah, you can have Cameroon, Gabon, Chad, all spit out, and then also the Central African Republic, which actually has a focus tree. Although Chad, Cameroon, and Gabon don't have focus trees, which is relatively sad. The Belgian Congo has a focus tree, which I don't like it because at the beginning you're thinking, okay, so there's one path where you're gonna be doing independence, and then another path where you're gonna be trying to preserve colonial rule, and so you have all this stuff. You don't have any choices here. This is just like there's no events that pop out whenever you select one or the other. It's just, you know, spirits and buffs and factories. But then, in the end, you either have restore order path or roundtable negotiations. So negotiations, you can either agree to Lumumba's demands, and Lumumba is like the main leader of, well, that was unfortunate. I am sorry for that. Was the main leader of the Congolese independence movement, and all around a very interesting historical figure. So yeah, you can agree there, but unfortunately you always stay as the Belgian Congo. Like, it doesn't actually change your ruling party. It doesn't actually make you independent. So I don't know. Maybe something happens with that if you're gonna be playing up until like the 1950s or something, but I don't know. Then another path that you can take is the regionalist, which just releases a bunch of little tiny separatists, aka, where is it? The Katangese Empire in Katanga, which has a lot of mining resources, or South Kasai, and I have no idea what South Kasai is supposed to be. Right? Yeah, South Kasai. What the hell is it? Yeah, I have no idea what South Kasai is, but whatever. Or you can restore order, which is just like a crackdown of the more radical colonial administration factions, which at first gives you a nationalist revolt, which is gonna be led by, I believe, Mobutu, who's another Congolese famous leader from the period, although much later on. And then you have the Congolese insurgency in the end. So you have two big insurgencies that you have to fight, but none of these like insurgent republics that are going to be spitting out from yourself have focus trees. So yeah, there's actually like no way of playing as Congo, like as independent Congo, unless you're going to be playing in the 1960s, I guess. I don't know. And that's one of my big grubs with the update, is that it feels like it was made for a lot of people that like to play in 1960, but I'm not one of those, because the overall experience isn't as good, in my opinion, in 1960, at least not yet, but hey, whatever. Then you have Uganda. Uganda is really complicated, even in 1960. But yeah, you have essentially, like, the weird thing about Uganda is that like within Uganda, like the country, there's another country called Buganda, which is a kingdom, but Uganda's a republic, but the kingdom is in the republic. So it's just a really weird situation, and you can have the kingdom of Uganda be like the big thing if you side with Kababa and you become a constitutional monarchy. Or you can have the Ugandan National Congress take over, and with this path in the 1960s can also lead to Idi Amin taking over, who's the famous dictator of the country. So yeah, you can become free as Uganda. So I'm happy that Uganda exists, because, you know, they can become free. And of course, what everyone was waiting for, which is Rhodesia updated. But Rhodesia actually already had a focus tree in 1950. So I believe they only really needed to make the 1960s Rhodesia tree. Now, have I missed anything for 1950? No. No, I don't. Oh, right. Spain. Spain has a new focus tree for 1950. Which is this one. And I believe, like, the skeleton of this was already in place, but yeah, they've changed around a few things. with Spain. And obviously, you know, other changes include like a lot of tech stuff. So if we go to look at the tech tree, look at this. This is all new and looks fucking amazing, to be honest. The only kind of problem is that it's at the beginning a little bit difficult to really distinguish what you have researched and what you have not researched. However, it becomes relatively easy later on, so it's not really that big of a deal. You have new mechanics with the text where you can research like support weapons for your infantry, such as anti-tank, man-portable weapon systems. And once you research them, you do not get bonuses immediately. You need to first adopt them, which is a decision that you click, and after a while, it gives you a modifier. Like once it completes the decision, which takes like 2 or 3 years, that's, you know, supposed to be like you distributing new equipment and tactics among your soldiers, and they become these like they're supposed to be kind of like laws in a way, but yeah. So that's tank ammunition, that's artillery ammunition, cannon ammunition, man-portable air defense, man-portable anti-tank defenses, and as you can see, you can really buff up your troops quite a lot with that, and infantry protection. So yeah, that's the new mechanic in the focus stream. There's new special operations stuff, and actually special operations unlocks cavalry, which is kind of hilarious. Although some countries have cavalry at the start, so yeah, it's not as cool as it perhaps needed to be. Then there's new units for the special forces. There's new techs that only like give you bonuses to different terrains. There's mechanized naval infantry. You know, there's just a bunch of great stuff that makes it so you can do a lot more different things with special forces. And then in the end, you have your obvious upgrade tree, kind of like a mini doctrine little system. Support companies, it's kind of similar, but they've got new support companies, so it's actually kind of similar to modern day 4, because you have like armored engineers, mechanized recon, and normal recon. So yeah, it's a lot like that in terms of what it does. Helicopter medical support, how great. So obviously you can do stuff with helicopters there. Then I believe this is new as well, but it's like, at least in terms of obviously the graphics, it's new. And by the way, it looks great. But yeah, it's pretty much standard. And oh, would you look at that Japanese tank? The kind of what the fuck? I think that's supposed to be a super heavy tank, especially because it's got a retarded name. Generally, if Japanese tanks have retarded names, they're retarded. If you've played World of Tanks or War Thunder, you know that. Fucking Japanese tanks. Anyway, like, the only problem with this new graphic kind of style that they've had is that, yeah, Japan is a pretty bad country to showcase this, but unfortunately, if we go ahead and look at how it integrates with the regular interface, it's not quite as good as it could be. Yeah, it's a relatively unfortunate state of affairs, in my opinion, and especially bad once you get to the Air Force, because they haven't really thought through like the image sizes, because it's probably really difficult to actually gauge like the kind of size that they need to make the image to make them fit in every different little slot that it's gonna go in, because, you know, this one might require a different image size than here, It's like such a mess. It does like look good, and it's relatively like it's relatively readable. Like, It's actually a lot more readable than the standard game because, you know, like I already can see over here that this is a fighter, whereas this is a heavy fighter, whereas this is, sorry, that looked like a bomber, but it's a heavy fighter. Whereas if I go, like, for example, this one, that's obviously a strategic bomber, you know? So yeah, it makes more sense with that, and it kind of reminds me of Darkest Tower, Hearts of Iron game. So yeah, that's basically mostly about it for the tech tree. Like, there's a new artillery, like there's light and heavy artillery, but who cares? Doctrines are the same, ships are pretty much the same, but the icons look a lot better now. They've definitely revamped that entirely, and it looks pretty great. Aircraft, you know, it's what you'd expect. Oh, would you look at that? You can be edgy and research the Blackbird. Tactical bombers, you know, all this stuff. It's obviously going to be there. And then the helicopters, as I believe there already were in, but there's also UAVs. Oh my god, how good. Yeah, okay, engineering is pretty much the same as it used to be, as is production. Rockets, I believe this was already in, and I don't think they really changed it in any way. There's still the space stuff, which is, you know, I guess pretty good. You always need to activate it with whatchamacallit, decisions. So yeah, you can do some space race. And then the WMDs, they still exist. So yeah, the tech tree is mostly the same, but there's been a nice revamp for the infantry tree, for the support tree, and a bit of the armor tree as well. So yeah, that's pretty great. And then a lot of the units have been rebalanced. At least they claimed. They claim that, you know, multiplayer is now pretty much viable, which is always pretty good. And obviously, as you can see, like, the UI has been improved massively. It looks a whole lot better now in terms of like consistency, readability. But yeah, especially like theme and consistency have been seriously improved in the update, and that's pretty great. Also, they've used a lot of assets from East versus West, such as the factory icons and stuff. Not the biggest fan of it, but it looks great. And yeah, for that, I can always give them a thumbs up, pretty much. And what else do I need to talk about? Let's actually see how the ship... Oh, that's so sad. That is so sad that it doesn't use the new icon like in Kaiserreich does. And then there's like a lot of different map changes, like here it seems like they've pretty much used the not really here, but and definitely not here, but yeah, they've changed around a lot of things on the map, especially if we look at Asia. Like no, not here. This is pretty much the way it used to be. I believe Tianjin is not a state in a normal Hearts of Iron 4 game. Oh yeah, that state is definitely not that shape in normal Hearts of Iron 4. Down here, it used to be this way. And Korea, I believe, already used to be this, like this, but yeah, whatever. So that's pretty much... There's a lot of map changes, and obviously in Africa there's a massive amount of map changes that I cannot recognize all, you know, off the top of my head, but like definitely here, there's a lot of new things. Here, a lot of new states, all that kind of stuff to represent the borders kind of better. And what else? What else? I'm thinking that I'm missing something. Oh yeah, right. There's... Where is it? What the? What? United States Congress? Oh, that's so great. That's so great. I have no idea how that's gonna be working, but... Apparently United States Congress is a thing, and it looks pretty great. But no, what I was thinking is the influence system. Now, there's a stat called power projection. I have no idea what it does. And then there is the foreign influence in a country, and I have no idea what it does. Oh, okay. Economic investments. Cost 100 political power and free power projection points. So if you have influence in a place, you can do various actions. Spread our ideology. Attempt a coup. Requires over 50% level of influence. How great. Enable a country to negotiate abnormally favorable deals at the expense of the investor. Now, see, the thing is, this influence system is quite great, but I have no idea, like, how you gain influence over someone. So, yeah, that's kind of a problematic thing. But yeah, essentially now countries are part of spheres of influence on a percentage basis. So you can see that the Federal Republic of Germany is influenced by the United States, the French, and the British. But if we look at another country, such as South Korea, the situation is a lot more dramatic for them because they're almost only influenced by the United States. Every country has this power projection stat, which is essentially supposed to represent how strong, how much they can project power, and how strong they are in general. And yeah, different countries can be influenced by different big powers, but again, I have no idea exactly how one gains power projection, how one gains influence over a country or the other. Maybe it's with trade deals, maybe it's with something. I have no idea. Anyway, as the Soviet Union, you actually start with like almost no power projection. How crazy. But yeah, like, you know, this is obviously supposed to represent how in the Cold War things were handled in general. I mean, this is pretty much generally how things work in international relations. You have spheres of influence and partitions of such spheres of influences. And some countries generally end up in one camp or the other based on that. However, again, I have no idea how they plan to develop the system or what its purpose is supposed to be right now. Obviously, you know, it reminds us of Victoria as a system, and I really like that the People's Liberation Army. Okay, yes, you need to found New China before you become the PRC. Anyway, like, it's good that the PRC is not Soviet influenced, because that's historically accurate. Anyway, yeah, that's basically about it for the update. So I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you've enjoyed. I'll see you soon, and if you would be so kind, do tell me down below in the comments whether you want me to play this or Kaiserreich tomorrow. So yeah, see you soon.